Welcome to the Write Your Book in a Flash podcast with top business leaders. You'll learn how successful people just like you have grown their businesses, expanded their influence, and made more money by writing a book. On each episode, you'll learn the inside secrets to help you create a book that can serve as a powerful marketing tool to skyrocket your business. I'm your host, Dan Janal, the author of Write Your Book in a Flash. I help thought leaders, business executives, and entrepreneurs write their books. To find out more, go to writeyourbookinaflash.com. Welcome, everyone. I'm delighted to welcome two guests to our show today, Richard Citrin and Michael Couch. Welcome, gentlemen.
Hey, Dan. Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Great to be with you.
Fantastic. Richard, why don't you introduce yourself first, and then Michael, go right after him. Tell us a little bit about yourselves.
Absolutely. Well, Dan, it's great to be with you. My career, I've had an amazing career. I've been trained as a clinical psychologist. I did that work early in my career, got involved in building a large consulting and clinical practice, which I then sold to a healthcare company before moving into corporate healthcare, which was a tremendous experience. I love the fact that I had a chance to really run a small business and then move into corporate healthcare. And then after 12 years in the corporate world, I decided to leave that and open my own consulting practice focused around leadership, strategy, and helping businesses to be successful in what they've done. And I've been doing that for the past, 10 years now, and just having a blast doing it. Great fun.
Fantastic. And I know you as the master of resilience.
Well, we'll talk about books in a little bit, but it's been as well over the past 10 years that I began to see myself as an author and have written, I wrote 3 books, but 2 in the last 10, which has really been a kind of a new challenge, new experience, and very, very rewarding to be able to see myself in that light, which is something I hadn't done before.
Fantastic. Michael, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So I'm the president of the very creatively named Michael Couch and Associates. And like Richard, I've had a varied career. I'm a psychologist as well, but industrial and organizational psychology is my background, and applied my trade in manufacturing for many years. In strategic talent management activities. I had an opportunity to move out of that area and work for a manufacturing company where I ran manufacturing and ran operations for a while, as well as headed up a business unit. And that opportunity, we sold the business in 2007 and gave me an opportunity to start my own practice. So that's it's about the same time that Richard started. So it's been about 13 years now doing, working with organizations of all kinds to create high performing cultures, as well as to build strategy driven leaders, teams, and organizations. So that's the and like Richard, it's just too much fun. I tell people I'm unemployable. I couldn't go back and work for somebody else now. It's just too much fun being on our own.
Fantastic. I'm sure a lot of people listening are feeling the exact same way, but they have a problem, and that is they need to stand out from everyone else who has wonderful credentials. So My suggestion for them is to write a book, because that's one way to stand out. Now, you guys have written a book together, and this is my 40th show. Thank you very much for being on it. And
Wow.
You're the first couple, to use that word incorrectly, the first duo to co-write a book and be on the show at the same time. So I'd like to focus on those areas. First, Richard, tell us just in 2 sentences, what is the book about? What is the title of the book, so we can get our arms around that? And then we'll delve into more of the issues about working with the co-author.
Yeah, so the title of the book is StrategyDriven Leadership, the playbook for developing your next generation of leaders. And it's really about a book. It's really a book that helps organizations to develop their leadership core in a way that's very customized and focused on driving success for that business.
Fantastic. Now, who originally came up with the idea for the book?
I think that came from me. I had actually started a book idea a while ago, and it was on strategy-driven organization development, sort of an esoteric and academic kind of book. But then it was starting working with Richard. We just started building a core of evidence-based practices around leadership development, and it really clicked. And so decided to take that whole idea and morph it into focusing on strategy-driven leadership.
Okay, so Michael, you had the idea for the book. At what point did you say, I need to work with someone else to make this book complete?
I think it was mostly the fact that Richard and I were doing this together with our clients. And yes, I struggled at times with deciding which way to go with a book, and it ended up being very helpful to get focused by working with somebody who I had a working relationship with already. We're not a couple yet, but we have a good working relationship, and who also we tried and proved out the methods. So it was great to be able to refer to the experiences we've had, and then using the book just to sort of organize and put it down. And once we get to that stage, I felt it went pretty smoothly. It was pretty easy.
Okay.
Dan, it's a fascinating story. To be first of all, Michael and I own our own companies, so we don't. It's not one company. Michael is Michael Couch and Associates, and I'm Citrin Consulting. But we've had this 10-year relationship where we've worked with a variety of clients together. We have our own clients as well, and we've really evolved this model of leadership development. I just want to jump in quickly and talk a little bit about the writing process, or how we came to write the book, which was that we decided that we would just sit down and start writing the book during 2018. And we said, listen, we'll write it, we'll self-publish it, we'll have it as a marketing piece. That'll be fine. If we do anything more with it, that's great. And if not, that'll be fine. So we weren't under any time pressures to write the book. We took 7 or 8 months to write the book. And when we showed it to a gal who was going to be our publisher here locally, she read the book and she said, you guys have an amazing amount of IP, intellectual property. You should think about commercially publishing it. So we spent November and half of December of 2018 writing a book proposal, sent it off to half a dozen publishers in January, and within a matter of 3 weeks, we had three acceptances on the book proposal. So we thought we had something really great, and it wasn't a situation where it was high pressure for us. So, I think, and Michael, I think you would agree that it was really, other than the work of writing, which has always been arduous, the experience was overall pretty positive.
Yeah, I had found it enjoyable. Where at times you think writing can be a burden, I ended up looking forward to it.
Great. How did you decide who would write what?
Yeah, well, we had a pretty good outline for the book to begin with, and the one thing that I had done in the previous book is when I had the outline, anytime I wrote something, I wrote it related to a section of the book. So when I did an article or a blog or something like that, I said, well, let's take a part of that book. So we tended to, I already had some content that matched, but Richard and I's backgrounds and areas of expertise are a little bit different. So it found it very easy to say, well, you take those pieces and I'll take these pieces because of the experience and content we already had.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Michael comes from a little more of an HR background than I do. So a number of the HR kinds of issues like talent analytics, for example, he was much better versed than I was. I'm a little more focused on the coaching aspect.
Yeah.
So I was able to work on that piece. But I have to say it was really a collaboration. Michael would write something, he'd send it to me. I'd give feedback, I'd make some modifications and suggestions. I'd write something, I'd send it to Michael, and he would make modifications and suggestions. And after 2 or 3 runs of that, we wound up having something that looked pretty good.
So it sounds like you had a lot of trust with each other at the beginning to start this relationship, and you knew each other's work because you've been working together for a long time. So it was really a nice melding of work with an existing person that you knew, liked, and trusted. So it was easy to come together to decide to write a book together, as opposed to putting a notice out on Facebook and saying, hey, I'm looking for a co-author. Yeah.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Rich, before we dive deeper into the writing process, Richard, just a question for you. You've written a number of books before. Why would you want to co-author a book instead of write a book with your own brand?
Well, I kind of like teamwork. Actually, my other 2 books were co-authored as well, and I don't find a diminishment in co-authorship. It's funny. Some of my writing colleagues said things like, make sure you're the first author, or why would you co-author a book? I kind of like working with people. I find it more enjoyable and fun, and so the truth is, Michael said it, he started this work. This was really a lot of it was his body of work to begin with. So not only did I feel comfortable with Michael being the first author, I thought he should be the first author. And that, in my mind, that doesn't diminish my role at all. Only if it did in my own mind.
Right.
Would it do that? So I think the idea of writing something together is a lot more fun. I think writing something by yourself can be much more painful. But getting feedback from people is a tremendous benefit in the writing process.
I'm sorry, Michael. I'm glad I asked a tough question. I was almost embarrassed to ask it, but that was a wonderful answer and very empowering answer. So thank you. Michael, go ahead.
Yeah, and I would say the same thing. I think the content is enriched by the fact that there were two of us. My chapter on coaching would probably have been 2 pages, where that was Richard's expertise. And it was, I think I learned more by going through the process with somebody else as well, because the feedback and editing process, you start work on your writing. It's a great way to work on not only the content but your style. And Richard and I have a slightly different style, but I think it melded very well as well.
Were you trying to have one consistent voice, or is it pretty obvious that Michael's writing one chapter and Richard is writing another, and does it make any difference?
Yeah, I think we tried to have one voice.
Yeah.
And we would modify sections accordingly to kind of secure that. Do you agree, Mike?
Yes, and we had the individual who helped us publish initially had us made that point about trying to speak it with a similar voice, and so I think one thing for me that it adjusted my voice down from being too academic and research based to be more conversational, which I think was a real plus.
Okay, I agree.
Okay. You guys worked together beforehand, so you might have had a shorthand on how to work with each other and know each other's foibles. But I'm wondering if you set up any rules or boundaries or expectations for each other at the outset to keep things so you both knew what was going on. So does that make sense?
Yes, it does make sense. I was trying to think. I don't think we had any specific rules beyond we set a plan and we stuck with the plan, and I think that was very helpful. That we wanted to have certain things done by certain times. Once we had a publisher, that really helped too, because we were well in advance of what they expected. They thought that this is what it typically takes to get a book published, but we were so far along and so well organized that I think we're able to get that book out probably 6 months more than what would normally have taken. So having a plan, sticking to the plan, and responding on edits, I think were maybe just sort of the plan was the explicit thing. The responding on edits was the implicit, that we just were good at sticking to that. Richard, would you have anything else that came to mind?
No, I think the only assumptions we had or expectations we had is we would set time frames for things.
Yeah.
So we would say, okay, let's work on this and we'll get it done by a week from Friday. And I think we were pretty insistent about maintaining that kind of schedule. Even though we had we were just writing it to write it, but we still felt like we needed to have a time frame. Michael and I could be a little bit OCD. There we go. Well, Michael is very OCD. I am moderately OCD. So I think that fit our personalities well.
Would you have any suggestions for 2 other co-authors who don't know each other quite as well as you do? What advice would you have for them to get to the wonderful relationship that you guys had?
Now, I think one thing, to get a coach, somebody who's been through this before, for sure. But I think the transparency would be sort of the one hallmark. I mean, if you didn't like it, you don't like it, say it. If you do like it, make sure you say that as well, and stick to the plan. But having a third party to, particularly somebody who knows the publishing process and knows the ins and outs and what's going to sort of smooth the skids, I think that that was very beneficial.
Yeah, I agree. The coach was essential. In our case, the publisher served in that role for us, and she would offer, her feedback was, you've got to focus on this or take this direction. So that was helpful. I think the other piece is that one of the themes we emphasize in the book is to go with your strengths, is to emphasize your strengths as a leader. And there were things that Michael does amazingly well, and there are things that I do fairly well. And so I think we respected and recognized what those different strengths are and worked with them rather than try to force ourselves into a box. If there was something that I didn't really know or wasn't comfortable about, I might take a shot at researching it. But if I knew Mike was really the expert in it, I said, hey, listen, I'm having trouble. I'm struggling with this. Can you help me out? And he'd jump in. So that was always good to know yourself well enough to know what you do well and what you don't do well.
Good point.
Great ideas. As far as revision goes, getting down to the nitty gritty, how did you work with the revision so that you didn't overwrite each other's work and you knew what each other had changed? So we're getting down to the real nitty gritty of systems here. And you might have a very easy answer, and I think there is one, but I'm just curious how you guys did it, because I'm working with one of my clients now, and we have a nice system and it works for us. I'm just curious, which is like we turn the system, the track changes on, and then she sees what I wrote and vice versa. But when you move a lot of things around, it can get pretty hairy. A lot of red on the screen. Yeah. How did you guys work with the revision process?
Well, we kept everything in Dropbox. So we used Dropbox as our kind of our foundation. And to be perfectly honest with you, we had a lot of problems with revisions. I'd say maybe the first 2 or 3 months, Mike, I don't think we really had a good revision process in play for ourselves. And so we really struggled with that, and finally came up with, I think, the decision that, the pieces you wrote, Mike, would be the masterpieces. The pieces I wrote would be the masterpieces, and we'd only work in those versions. So we went to write-overs or anything like that. We just kept one version ultimately. Is that how you remember it, Mike?
Yes, yeah. Partly because it was sort of painless. I don't nothing comes to mind as any secret beyond we knew who owned what. I think that's a great way to say it. Who is the thought leader in that on the topic that was being written, and I think in that case the thought leader had the final say as well. But I have to say the feedback, even as the sections I was a thought leader on, the feedback from Richard and from somebody else is always very helpful and beneficial, just to so you don't get stuck in your own brain.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we also, the other thing I would add is we talk every week.
Yeah.
To make sure things were on track, and then we'd meet in person. Maybe every 3 or 4 weeks, we just go down to a central meeting location, and we'd spend the morning kind of reviewing what we had, and if there was any question of confusion or anything like that, we would use those meetings to clarify that up.
Great. Now, getting back to the whole impetus for the book, was this a labor of love where you said, we've been working on this. This is a topic that we really like. We don't care if it really sells or not. We're just academics and we want to have fun with this. Or did you say, we're moving in a new direction. We see a potential for new business in this area, and it's not used by anyone else. So let's go in and make a name for ourselves, or something else?
Yeah, it I think started off a little bit as a labor of love, but with the success we'd had with the sort of retooled approach to leadership development and how to think about building your cadre of leaders, we realized we had something. We had some very successful projects with a good impact. The clients were very pleased and very supportive. So it was another opportunity to create some what we call marketing gravity. Something that'll help us. First of all, it would help me put ideas together in an organized form. But then, second, was a way to put it in a different in a form that can really catch a broader audience's attention. So I think starting as a labor and ending up as something great, new and great.
It sounds like you're already making money and getting new clients from the book, even though the book hasn't been published yet. Is that correct?
The
The book.
Oh, the book is published. Okay, I apologize.
Yeah,
Yes.
the book is out there, yeah. And we have gotten new business with it. You never know where the business is going to come from. I made a trip out to California with a friend, just kind of on a lark. He had some clients he thought might be interested in the book, and we met with somebody who asked me to just do a 1-hour presentation on the book. And I said, I'd like to know a little more about your work. And he said, no, I just want to hear about the book. So I did an hour-long presentation, gave him a copy of the book, and really didn't expect to hear anything from him. 3 days later, he calls me up. He says, hey, this is fantastic. I want a proposal from you. Yeah, I would just add to your previous question. I think it's been a labor of love, and I think it's something that's really powerful and meaningful and transformational in terms of how organizations develop their leaders. So it certainly is the latter in terms of marketing opportunities. But I've got to kind of contain myself when I talk to people, because I think we have something that's really on target and can make a significant difference in how organizations develop and grow their leadership.
Fantastic. As we're wrapping up here, one final question about any tips that you would have to other people who are considering working with co-authors on how to have a successful relationship. Michael?
Yeah, well, I think, as I mentioned, the transparency. Okay. It would, was, I think, a key component. For me, it was also learning to let go. When Richard, maybe on the third point, said, or made a point that something just wasn't working, or it didn't make sense, or I was still being too academic. That really helped me, to be able to let go of something that just wasn't clicking. So I think those two items, and recognizing that it's a partnership as well. It is a collaboration, and collaborations is not an easy skill to develop. So you have to work at it. And Richard described how we really worked at the collaborating. It just doesn't happen naturally. You've got to really be intentional about the approach.
Great.
Yeah, I would agree with those. I think letting go is really important, because sometimes we get hung up on our ideas and we miss the greater opportunity. I think the other thing is, forge a friendship with this person. Michael and I are good personal friends. We socialize. Our wives socialize. So I think having somebody who you like and care about is very, very important. And I think Michael's idea from earlier around getting a coach, getting somebody who can help you address those issues in the middle ground and can help resolve conflicts, and perhaps most importantly, give a third person perspective is a very important component to have. Somebody like Dan Janal, for example.
Well, I couldn't agree more. Thank you very much for the plug. I appreciate that. Gentlemen, as we wrap up here, why don't you tell us about who your ideal client is and how they can get in touch with you, and then we'll sign off.
Yeah, we're our ideal client tends to be pretty broad, but we're finding a middle market, middle to larger companies have a great initial place to begin with. But we also have clients that are 18, 20,000 employees. But with the changing demographics and the changing business climate, it's a great time to be thinking about leadership and how you're going to sustain your leadership through changes, and if it's going to demand some new skills. And that's exactly what we're trying to do, is match the leadership and your talent to your strategy, so that it can really drive success. And
Michael, what is your website address?
www.mcassociatesinc.com. We also have a website for the book, StrategyDrivenLeadership.com.
Fantastic. And Richard, who is your ideal client, and what is your website address?
Well, our ideal client here is organizations between 35 and 400 employees, that mid-market area. Large companies tend to have some models around how they're developing their leaders. It may work, it may not work, but those folks who are heading those departments are usually pretty entrenched. These folks of 35 to 400 employees, they're struggling. They're not quite sure how to develop their leaders, and that's a perfect size group for us. And my website is Citrin, Citrin, consulting.com.
Great. Thank you. And thanks everyone for listening to the Write Your Book in a Flash podcast, the only podcast that shows you exactly how people just like you have built their businesses by writing a book. If you'd like to write your book but don't know where to start, you can find great information at writeyourbookinaflash.com. Thanks again for listening. We'll be back next week with another insightful interview to help you become a top business leader.